It's your girl Stacey Cake, your host for What's Hot, and we will not today.
Stacey, love you, baby.
That's hot. Gang shit.
Come on, get burnt with me.
What's up, guys? It's your girl Stacey Cake, your host for What's Hot, and as many of you know, the world has taken a huge loss with the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna Bryant, and as well as the 7 others who lost their lives during that horrible helicopter crash that took place on January 26th. So today for Who's Hot Wednesday, I have a very special guest. Her name is Kalima. She is the CEO of Serenity Mental Health and Wellness. And we're going to be slowing things down and really just breaking down this incident and how it affected his family, how it affected us as fans, and just what we can do, to help everyone get through this tragedy. So, welcome, Kalima. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I am well. How are you?
I am good. So can you tell the What's Hot fam just, a little bit about your title and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and I am the owner of Serenity Mental Health and Wellness Services, and I provide therapy, counseling to young adults and women. I also do some couples work as well, and my specialty is around the area of grief and loss.
So grief is definitely a big part of this incident with Kobe Bryant, from loved ones to fans to friends, teammates.
Yeah.
Everyone had just been impacted in some way. And I think it's crazy that people who aren't even necessarily basketball fans have had serious reactions to this. A large part of this whole story breaking was how it was broke with the media. TMZ caught a lot of flack because apparently his family hadn't been informed when they broke the news, allegedly. So do you think that can play a part to his family's grief, or made it worse if they found out the same way everyone else found out?
I mean, absolutely. And a lot of my language that explains what I do, the first sentence starts out with loss can bring it shows up like a shockwave, right, to our hearts. So when we lose someone, that in and of itself is really shocking. And then to find out by way of media or just a phone call or a post, people in their personal lives have just found out that loved ones have passed by a Facebook post. That can be devastating, absolutely devastating.
So in what ways can it really affect the impact? I know you said devastating, but what I'm trying to personify that for people who may not have experienced something like that.
Well, in the mental health world, we would call it trauma.
Okay.
Right? So trauma is something that is unexpected. It kind of comes as a shock, right? So if his family did not know, because TMZ is saying that they knew and they released the information, but they did not know, the real term for it would be traumatic, right? Would it be a shock? And as far as the emotions, they're going to go through the same emotions as any one of us would feel. But it's almost like what I call the impact of it is just more damaging because they didn't get a proper notification.
Right.
Almost like when we have a loved one or someone close to us that has been sick with an illness and we know that they're going to pass. When they do pass, it hurts. It's still devastating, but the impact of it, we kind of already knew, right? Maybe they had an illness, maybe they had a disease. But that's different than when somebody loses their life tragically, like in this case by a helicopter or a car crash, something where we did not expect that person to go on the day and the time that they did.
Right. So it's just like surprise on top of surprise.
It's surprise and shockwave on top of surprise and shockwave.
And then I wanted you to kind of talk about after everyone found out on social media, it tends to be a lot of pressure for certain celebrities to respond on social media, to grieve on social media. Can you kind of talk about the different ways people grieve to see to like, is that normal that we feel like we have to post something after experiencing something traumatic or learning something devastating?
Yeah, that normal word, right? What's normal, what's not normal when it comes to dealing with loss. And so people grieve in many different ways. Some feel that they are able to, they want to, they have an urge to speak out, to immediately cry, to immediately like show some sense of, oh my gosh, I've experienced the loss. And then you'll find people that have the complete opposite response. They need hours or they need a day or more to even process the shock of the loss, right?
Right.
And so there's no right or wrong way. It really just depends on the person's personality, in terms of how they show it. And there needs to be less of a judgment around how people show that they are grieving or how they show their feelings about someone's passing or a loss of any kind.
Great. So, and on the other hand, we also had one of the victims from the crash. Her husband was seen pretty quickly on TV speaking about his loss and how it impacted, you know, his children and things like that. Do you think, like, what do you think of that? Because I was trying to stop myself from judging that, but for me, it just seemed very quick to be able to put yourself on a national platform such as like CNN and talk about something so hard.
Because it's the shock of it. So this word's going to come up a lot, right? The shock of it sometimes can cause almost a delayed reaction. So he's having a reaction to it, but he hadn't actually processed through it yet. It's almost like having adrenaline. Some people, like when they get hurt, they could get, I don't know, something really bad can happen, like a physical pain. Right. But they jump up and they run, or they're able to move it. Because there's this physiological, biological component that we have, this fight or flight response. Right. So it appears that his response was from a place of still being in shock and not having really processed that his wife is gone. Equivalent to someone, I don't know, having half their leg cut off, but they're still moving. Right. Okay. Because they don't realize our bodies have this, it's like an adrenaline, and I'm not a medical doctor, but it's like an adrenaline where sometimes it takes a while for our minds and our body to connect to a particular feeling. Gotcha. And so it appeared that maybe he was having that kind of a response where, he heard the news, but did the news really sink in? Right. Probably not. So it's like, but how it can happen 4 days later or 3 days later when that reality sets in that, hey, this person is actually gone. So some people will take on that same kind of response to loss as if someone got injured or shot and didn't realize that they were shot and they were able to keep running. Got you. So when it comes to the children who experience loss, Kobe left behind, 3 daughters, and not to mention his wife. So how might that experience of losing a dad be different or similar to Vanessa's experience of losing her husband and someone she's been with, pretty much her whole life? Right. Well, the children are going to have a very similar response, but obviously the relationship is different, right? But not so much. Girls especially look up. So let's talk about 2 kind of factors here. the fact that there were girls as opposed to boys. I don't know if you guys or you or the people listening are familiar with this thing called an Oedipus complex. It is a philosophy that girl children kind of attach to their fathers almost in a romantic way, like a husband and a wife.
I have heard, yeah.
Yeah, it's called the Oedipus complex. Anyone, that's hearing this can look it up. And so they may have a similar response to Vanessa in the sense of that, right? In the way that they regard their dad. But like, for example, they have a baby who unfortunately will never know him because she's only 7 months. And then unfortunately, even the 2-year-old, our brains at that age, if his picture is around, they'll know his face and they'll know by what they're being told by mom. But they won't remember the experience of their dad.
Right.
So for the 2 younger ones, the grieving process will probably look completely different than the 17-year-old who has had her dad through her whole cognitive development. And then the mom, she's lost a person that not just she's in a relationship with, but an intimate relationship. They were husband and wife. So losing a life partner like that, again, is absolutely devastating. But then she's also mourning the loss of a child at the same time. So it's just a natural thing of when you say, how would the grief look like? For kids, it's the same. But for the younger ones, they probably will not remember him. The oldest one will. And what's unfortunate about this situation is that she's not just bearing and losing a husband, but she's also lost a child at the same time, which is 2 totally different relationships. And I can only imagine the pain that she's experiencing.
Yeah, that's definitely horrific. Like, that's an emotional aspect.
I can't even think about how would I cope and how would I move about life having lost both those people at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. What advice would you give to fans with dealing with the loss, of Colby? Not only Colby, but then the person many of us believers going to carry on his legacy, little Gigi. So, for some fans who grew up watching basketball, who, idolized Kobe, they're taking it hard because a lot of them saw him as role models. What advice would you give to supporters who are struggling to kind of get over this tragedy?
Yes. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, right? Or a 1, 2, 3 step kind of process to it. But what I will say that has been really helpful for the clients that I work with and in my work as a grief therapist is to find some way to memorialize and honor the person. That might look like finding their old quotes and, old videos and kind of putting something together that you can memorialize for them. I think that is one of the coolest ways to heal. And then my number one thing is to make sure you take time to feel the feeling of the loss. A lot of us, when we get these unwanted feelings of hurt and pain and devastation, we really want to not feel that way. So we try to do everything not to, talk ourselves out of it, keep ourselves busy. We're always just trying to rid ourselves of these negative emotions. And one of the things that I say is in order to heal, we have to deal. So make sure you are spending time feeling those emotions, whether that's taking 10 or 15 minutes every day to cry about it, do that, yell about it, do that. So the fact that you said, not only him, but his daughter who was following in his footsteps, this was such a tragic loss. You're going to feel it. I'm going to feel it. The fans are going to feel it. And we need to allow ourselves time to actually feel it and then find some way to memorialize them and to honor them.
A lot of people, fans and supporters meaning well, and even media outlets, meaning well, I noticed even when Nipsey passed, a lot of people tend to tag like the significant others in a lot of posts. And I spotted a couple of videos that Lauren London had been tagged in when Nipsey passed, and they made me sad. So I'm like, why would you tag her in this? And she just lost, just like yesterday, lost someone. So, and of course, people are probably doing the same thing with Vanessa. And, saying a lot of stuff every day on her page. Can you kind of talk about whether or not that's a good tactic as a fan to do, in an effort to show your support?
Yeah, I would have to say that I think that it's not a good thing to do, especially in the beginning. Those videos, those photos, those things that other people might have of that person, that's yours. The same way her loss and the memories of that is her story to tell. Give it some time. I'm not saying never, but maybe give it some time, give it some months down the line. Wait till that actual spouse or that person starts posting themselves, because then that's a good indication that they're doing better, right? Once they start to post their feelings toward their loved one, you can kind of trust that maybe they're in a different place. But right away, it's too soon.
Yeah.
It's too soon to reminder of it. Let that person be the one to do it.
Right. Just like me as a media person, sometimes I think we get caught up in our job, and you, even as like a writer, or if you have certain ethical boundaries, like your job trains you, and sometimes you're in robot mode and you're not thinking like, oh, this is like affecting somebody else's life. So what questions should you be asking yourself when we, like, as journalists, as media people, when we write these stories, when I have breaking news, like, what questions should we be asking ourselves when we're trying to frame these stories or deliver these tragic incidents?
That is a really excellent question, because like you said, as journalists, as news reporters, right, on the news stations that we watch, that is the job. And so even in TMZ's defense, right, it's like that is the job, to get the story, get it first, get it out there. But one of the things you want to ask yourself is, what kind of story, right, am I rushing to get out there? So something in the case of someone dying, ethically, morally, is that a story that you need to be first on as a journalist, as a news reporter? Someone dying of that magnitude and in that fashion. So kind of just pausing, right? Because there are a lot of stories that can be breaking news that maybe don't have to do with death per se, but maybe having a standard for your company, your agency, right? That you're that this is your line of work, and saying, hey, maybe when someone dies really tragically, we won't necessarily need to be the first to report it. We can be the second or the third, right? After the first 10 minutes that the story has broke. But really setting a standard for yourself in terms of how soon. So I would say the second thing is, okay, maybe I'm deciding to do this particular story. How soon? Just based on the factors. Who is it? How did it happen? Where did it happen? And who's all involved?
And I think too, we can report things also and say we don't know all of the details about an issue.
My third point.
Yeah, because I think that's become more of the pressure. You can say, oh, this has happened, but we're still waiting to find out.
Absolutely. That was going to be my third point. Yeah, to make sure that when you are going to put the story out, to make sure that you don't give any false facts. I mean, you can just come on and say 2 sentences about it, and then, details to be confirmed will be back, right? So that was actually the third point that I was going to make.
Great. So, like, Now, as people, going to move forward, it's also a issue with that's been coming up about the NBA specifically, which they did end up canceling and postponing a few games in Kobe's honor. But initially, like, there were videos of, like, people on the Wizards team, like, crying during the game because that first day when the news broke, like, they still had to play the game. And a lot of people were saying that they were going to play because that's what Kobe would have wanted. So, do you think that's like a legitimate reason, or just again connecting it back to the family? Do you think it's more respectful just to say no? Like, we need to. These people need to grieve. These people need to process. Like, the world shouldn't just go on.
Yeah, it just depends on the person and the person and the people involved that are affected by the loss. It really just depends on their personal preference. So you kind of answered it in a sense in saying some people feel like this is what the person would have wanted. They wouldn't have wanted us to just take the moment, so to speak, and cry about it for a whole 24 hours and then pray tomorrow. They would want us to keep pushing. This was something that was scheduled, right? And I'm not a big sports person, but it was a game scheduled and people had bought tickets, right? And it's like they might feel like, if this person were alive, what would they say?
Right.
They would probably want us to keep going, whether that looks like crying on the field, crying on the court, crying when they're sitting at the bleachers in between playing the different rounds, but they would want us to keep going. I'll share that when I lost my dad this past July of 2019, I had clients, it happened on a Sunday, and I had clients scheduled that full week. I saw all my clients. And my dad was my best friend, right? We were really, really close. He lived with me. I was his full-time caregiver. And it happened on Sunday. Monday, I was seeing clients. Somebody else would be like, whoa, right? That's how? With somebody who lived with me in my home, that was my best friend since childhood. Devastating.
Yeah.
But I kept going, and it was right for me.
Okay.
So the biggest thing that I want people to kind of take away from this conversation that we're having about grief is that it is so specific to the individual in terms of how it will look, how will they feel with people talking about it, continuing to work, continuing to play, tagging them in videos and pictures, whether new or old. The entire response in grief is so unique to the individual that there's no right or wrong. There's no normal and abnormal. It's what do you feel comfortable with doing? When I disconnected that video session or when I left my office, I processed and I dealt.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily want to spend the whole day or cancel everybody for the week and then just sit in that.
Right.
It's so unique. And that's one of the things that I want people to take away from this whole conversation around grief and loss as well.
And I kind of I'm sorry I'm jumping, but I kind of had another thought about the media aspect with, it was a journalist who got in trouble for bringing up Kobe's rape case as well on Twitter. And then on top of that, bringing up an article that she didn't even write. How can that be even more devastating for like people that are grieving his death to come across things like that? And I couldn't imagine his family being reminded of that during such a horrible time, or even his daughters.
People are people, right? And unfortunately, we can't control what people do, but it is like a double whammy. See, situations like this also expose the heart of people. And you can see that there's no grace, there's no forgiveness, there's no anything as it relates to that, even in someone's passing. So there will always be people who will highlight the negative, even at a time of someone's passing. And so as people, we need to know that, remember that. And this is one of those incidences where we literally almost have to like let it, like brush it completely off, because we cannot control the insensitivity, the lack of class, the lack of care, right?
Yeah.
We can't control the actions of people. And so in that instance, I mean, it can definitely cause a second wave or a second wind of hurt. But then again, it might not be. His wife stayed married to him, had 2 more children with him. So that means she's in a place of forgiveness with him. Whether he did it, didn't do it, the accusations that went around, that whole situation was 16 years ago. So I think it's totally inappropriate. Can definitely cause just a rage of emotions. Can you imagine as a wife, like, hey, if I forgave him, like, who are you? And he wasn't even convicted.
Right.
And he was not convicted. He was accused. And then let's not talk about the racial issues that have come up as it relates to Kobe's passing and the bringing up of his past, as opposed to other people that are maybe of a different ethnic background. Are they treated the same? No.
So to kind of wrap up, if you had to summarize like the biggest lesson about grief that, you know, we can take away from this tragedy, like what would it be, the biggest lesson?
The biggest lesson I would say to take away from this tragedy with Kobe is that we need to live our lives to the fullest. One of the things I feel like that lesson kind of showed a bit or a lot in Vanessa's post. You know, 2 days later, she said he and Gigi knew that they were loved, which means that they seem to have lived their life in the present. Really just maximizing all of the time that they had with each other. And so I think that if we can learn anything, also the legacy that he left behind, right? What are we doing with our lives? So that living life in the present and living in the present has to also do with the choices that we make and making sure that we're leaving a legacy, that when we're not here anymore, people are still talking about us. They are still learning from us. So just being really, really present and living every day to its fullest, walking in your purpose, making sure that people know that you love them, you know, showing them that you love them. That is what I would say would be the biggest lesson. Die empty.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was very helpful, and I'm sure you've helped many people and
Thank
with
you.
this. So I really appreciate you know, coming to talk about this, and I'm so sorry about your loss that you experienced over the summer.
Thank you.
And you are strong, and it radiates through this interview.
And I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that I was available to have this discussion.
Make sure you guys like, comment, share this video, and subscribe to the channel right now. See you guys next time.